Cetamura del Chianti is an archaeological site located on a hilltop about 35 kilometers north of Siena and on the property of the Badia a Coltibuono in the comune of Gaioli in Chianti. You're on a hill that is about 695 meters above sea level, and it's a hill which has been considered inappropriate for agriculture, and this is fortunate because we have preserved here extensive remains of habitation beginning from the earliest period of the Etruscans, approximately in the 7th century BCE, going on down into the period of the Roman Empire and then of the Middle Ages. And there are documents that are known from the Middle Ages that refer to the place as Cetamura, which has become today Cetamura. And the place was discovered by Alvaro Tracchi, a part-time archaeologist from San Giovanni Valdarno. Tracchi found the site in 1964, and soon after that, the permission to excavate the site was granted to Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, in the United States. So every year we have here a field school of students from the United States who work at different levels depending on their experience. Collaborating with Florida State University, we now have New York University, Syracuse University, and the University of North Carolina at Asheville. These students work at beginning levels if they have not excavated before, and then they learn other tasks as they advance in the field. What are we discovering here? Well, some fascinating things. First of all, about the Etruscans. As I said, they began to inhabit this hill in the 7th century BCE, before the Common Era, and we have evidence that they were here also in the 6th century and perhaps part of the 5th. After that, there is a kind of abandonment of the site, and it was re-inhabited in the 4th century BCE, and at that time we find that there is extensive evidence of the Etruscans, and in particular in a zone we've been digging for some years, which is referred to as the artisan zone, zona artigianale. And in that zone we've found evidence of the working of iron, of the making of textiles, of the creating of brick and tile, and also weights for the loom. So there's evidence that all of these artisans were working together in the same zone. And perhaps what is most fascinating is that right next to the artisan zone there is an Etruscan sanctuary. And there we have found evidence of worship of two gods who were known from inscriptions as Lur and Lent. And the cult involved altars and a large courtyard where offerings were burnt and deposited in the ground. So we have a great deal of evidence of breaking, burning, and burying of Etruscan artifacts, which can be dated fairly accurately to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. So this is the last period of Etruscan civilization, and it's quite fascinating to see what their customs were, what their rituals were during that period. And the exhibition of the Sanctuary of the Etruscan Artisans focuses on this aspect of the excavations at Cetamura, the relationship between the artisans and this sanctuary. And often we find that there are offerings in the sanctuary that must have been made by the artisans themselves. We are coming into the area of the sanctuary, and this has been very exciting to excavate and discover a rock altar, the main altar of the sanctuary, in front of which we found a cavity in the earth which had been carefully filled in. We think that it is a sacred cavity which for some reason was closed, and all around it we found evidence of offerings to the gods. And these included a deep pit which contained a great deal of broken pottery and objects associated with the artisans, items of brick and iron, and miniature cups, votive cups of the type that are appropriate for the gods, not for humans. And we also found evidence of vegetation being offered to the gods, but no bones. This is the sanctuary of the 2nd century BCE, in which the appropriate offerings were items from the artisan zone, as well as fruits of the earth, including apples, grapes, olive, grain, and material known as sorb apples. So these things were offered to the gods in various areas. One special votive feature was a kind of table setting, a place setting for the gods, in which there was a pot of cooked chickpeas, alongside of which there was a goblet covered with a black paint on the exterior, which had been cut exactly in half vertically as a way to indicate that it was for the gods and not for humans. Often when we find these objects broken, it means that the person who is offering them is giving them to the gods. The gods can still use them, but humans will never use them again. So when was the well first built? This is a very good question. It is carved out of the bedrock. There are no little walls running around it, as we often find in ancient wells. It's carved out of the bedrock and goes down very deep, and we are now hypothesizing that it was first dug and used by the Etruscans. But it remains to find out when we get to the bottom of the well. And we're hoping we'll find artifacts that pertain to maybe the earliest Etruscan period in the 7th century BCE, maybe the second wave of Etruscan activity, which begins in the 4th century and goes on through the 3rd and the 2nd century. What we've been digging most recently is almost all Roman, with the exception of enough medieval pottery to tell us that those Roman things were cleared from the site and were put here during the Middle Ages. So we find, for example, Roman window glass, a particular type of Roman pottery, which is known as terra sigillata, and a number of objects that give us a clue that the Roman baths had been destroyed.
Archaeological finds discovered at Cetamura are conserved and restored by students of Studio Arts Centers International. SACI is a US non-profit university program in Florence with undergraduate and graduate programs in art design and art conservation. Thanks to the permission granted by the Archaeological Superintendenza of Tuscany, SACI's Arts Conservation Department and Florida State University have been collaborating for over 15 years, offering over 200 international students the opportunity to learn how to conserve and restore artifacts. Widely respected Italian conservation ethics and the methods of the State Conservation Center, the Centro di Restauro, are taught and applied as a direct and intense hands-on experience. Stabilization, scientific documentation, and the study of Etruscan objects is of the utmost importance, since limited written texts survive, so material culture is the main source for our knowledge. preliminary investigation and scientific analysis of materials is performed along with the conservation work in order to obtain the most information about the context and lifestyle of the Etruscans. During the courses, various types of artifacts are treated by students. You learn how to clean, consolidate, and reassemble numerous local and imported Etruscan ceramics and metal objects made of iron and bronze. The principal aim is to stabilize the artifacts, eliminate the cause of decay, and finally to give the object back legibility by restoring its appearance as close to the original as possible while respecting its history. Students are encouraged to participate in all phases of this complex work and understand that only through open collaboration between archaeologists, scientists, and conservators can we achieve the finest results and preserve the ancient artifacts for future generations.